Now, on the first episode of At the Table, we began what we hope to be an ongoing conversation about food. You see, first we examined food insecurities and how some communities, mainly poor and black and brown communities, face significant challenges accessing foods. We later explained how past trauma can lead to disordered eating, such as binge eating behaviors. Today, we want to further those discussions by speaking with the registered dietitian, Christyna Johnson, who shares why she is anti-diet and encourages her clients to form a relationship with food based off what works for them and not Western standards of beauty. So yeah, we are digging in on orthorexia, fat phobia, and diet culture, all in today's episode. This is part podcast, part storytelling, part breaking bread. This is At the Table. I posted a story about you coming on, and I was like, just about the frustration that people have, and someone responded, yeah, because you can't eat anymore. Like, you just don't even know what to eat. Mm-hmm. Labeling foods good or bad. What is safe to eat?
I firmly practice from an all foods fit of like, you can eat whatever sounds great to you. Check in with yourself of, do I feel good after I eat this? You consume it and you're like, okay, I feel energized. I feel ready to go. Great. Did a good job. If you eat it and you're like, man, I'm feeling really sluggish. I don't feel whatever. Okay, check in. Like, is it the frequency that you're eating that? Or do you just genuinely like not feel good afterwards? So maybe you can still enjoy it, just not as often.
All right. So with that being said, I just heard that there are basically layers. There are so many layers. What is diet culture?
The way I sort of summarize it is diet culture is the systems of beliefs that say bodies are inherently supposed to look a specific way. You're supposed to eat a specific way. You're supposed to behave or perform health a specific way in order to gain social capital, meaning like status within society. And it comes through the lens of gaining proximity to whiteness. Ultimately, that's what it is you are gaining proximity to whiteness because our beauty standard here and our health standard is based on whiteness, especially the health research. A lot of that is based on a majority population where they do the research on white people, specifically white males. If you look at it within each culture, you'll see people who divorce themselves from their own culture in order to meet the standards of health that the Western health has set out. Okay. Where you'll see people who, whether or not they actually immigrate to America, where they're like, oh, I can't eat my cultural food because it's so, quote, bad for me. And if I want to be healthy, if I want to live a long life, I can't eat this way. But then they find themselves like missing these different aspects of their culture because they can't participate because it's food related.
Okay. Let's cut away to examine how our view of health and wellness could be influenced by a singular lens. So, I took some time to visit the Commission on Dietetic Registration, which provides demographic data on those who join the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. This led me to the 2021 Compensation and Benefits Survey of the dietetics profession, which is a reliable source for the profession. I found 92% of dietetic practitioners identified as women. 6% identified as Hispanic or Latino, with 6% being Asian, 3% Black or African American, 1% American Indian or Alaskan Native. Now that's just 16%, which would leave the remaining 84% to identify as white. To further illustrate this, I searched Amazon for books on diet culture and healthy eating, and as I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled behind the titles of books with words like skinny, thin, healthy eating, healthful habits, and fit, all the authors were largely white. Oh, but here's mine, Fit Man Cook. Hey, holding it down. Thanks, Jesse. So, why does this make me wonder why the diet conversation is not more inclusive of other cultures when you consider the rates of issues like heart disease and diabetes being more prevalent in BIPOC communities? So, Christyna is certainly not inaccurate when she notes the explicit and implicit impact of Western standards on wellness. And yes, I realize that people may wish to change eating behaviors or adopt a new style of eating for a wide variety of reasons. Maybe it's a fitness challenge like running a marathon or a triathlon like me, or to address the onslaught of chronic illness, or maybe to lessen their environmental impact by eating less meat. And for some, it may be because they want to feel more confident or attractive, which to Christyna's point, you have to ask why. Who and what told you that a larger body is unattractive? All this to say, this topic has some layers to explore. Let's get peeling.
we're looking back at the rest of our life. What do I want people to say? Do I want them to be like, oh, Christyna was great, but she was never at the family stuff because she didn't want to eat it. She never came to my birthday because she didn't want to eat.
Yeah.
When I think about what I want people to say about me at the end of this, none of that has to do anything with my body. Except maybe she gave great hugs. Now, if that's the case, yes. But everything else, like, has nothing to do with who I am as a person and what I want people to perceive about me. Mm-hmm. And if I let go of that, then I'm like, okay, I'm so much less invested in, like, I have to look this particular way and I have to present in the world this particular way. Because again, I'm still holding on in some aspects to this proximity to whiteness that I'm trying to gain. And if I'm not trying to gain that, then I'm like, okay, I can go out with my friends and like have this meal and do whatever. And I'm going to be fine because I still feed myself like regular. Like nothing changed about that particular meal. Mm-hmm. Like to me in my mind, I'm like, Thanksgiving is just Thursday with a fancy meal. Mm-hmm. But it's really no different if I don't look at that meal any differently than I would look at any of the other meals that I would consume. Mm-hmm. Then I'm able to check in with myself. Do I feel comfortable? Am I full? Am I comfortably full? Or did I go past my limit? Did I go past a point where I felt comfortable? If I check in with myself, I'm still going to eat the same amount that I would normally eat, whether I'm away from home or I'm home.
Challenging that, because I know I'm hearing in the back of my mind some trainers, that I've worked with, and they're like, no, that's actually dangerous because some people are actually obese and they're unhealthy. And this whole thing about the body positivity and embracing yourself and eating for what makes you feel good, that actually just leads to a lot more unhealthy eating behaviors.
If you're that concerned, refer them to a dietitian. Also, I think, and we talked about this, our obsession with health is detrimental to our actual health.
All right, let's go into that layer.
We are so obsessed. I was reading some research on how our fixation on people's body sizes creates larger environments where people exist in larger bodies. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with someone existing in a larger body, but I was looking between the research and I was reading where they were looking at the similarities between the war on obesity and the war on drugs. Because look at whose body is targeted. Mm-hmm. The war on drugs, they were not worried about white people. They were worried about the crack epidemic in the hood. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the war on obesity, we're still looking at Black bodies. People, if you really look at what's happening in the research, they're not upset because white people have diabetes or white people have hypertension. They are upset because Black people and people of color have diabetes and have hypertension. Mm. So it's the same war, it's just a different name.
Where's the line in the sand, though?
The line in the sand is, again, if you're really that concerned, if you're concerned that this person is genuinely unwell, send them out to a medical professional. Mm-hmm. If you were genuinely that concerned. Otherwise, you're just contributing to shame. And that shame oftentimes leads to the opposite of whatever behavior you're hoping to get.
So it should come as no surprise to anyone that fat shaming exists in the media. One incident immediately comes to mind. That one-time fitness celebrity and TV personality, Jillian Michaels, questioned why people are celebrating Lizzo's overweight body in 2020. And she also made sure to note that we aren't going to be celebrating if Lizzo gets diabetes. Thanks, Jillian. And as you may nod your head in agreement and think, how could she? How could they? What about the instances where the fat shaming may be more subtle because you agree? Like when Bill Maher said,
now the term body positivity is used to mean I'm perfect the way I am because I'm me. It's Orwellian how often positivity is used to describe what's not healthy.
And this, I believe, drives to the heart of Christyna's message. What's the impact of all of this? Not every person in a larger body is automatically lazy, have severe health issues, and is unattractive. And if you think you're helping by calling it out, let me tell you, you're not, and research says you're not. A study out of UPenn Medical School, published in the Journal of Obesity Society in 2017, found that aside from the effects of a higher BMI, which is body mass index, and depression, higher levels of weight bias internalization, meaning applying negative stereotypes to oneself, were associated with increased risk for cardiovascular and metabolic disease. See, the participants were split into two groups. So one group who had heavily internalized negative stereotypes and another who had a lower level of weight bias internalization. Now, the participants who applied negative weight stereotypes the most, let's call them group A. they were 3 times more likely to have metabolic syndrome and 6 times more likely, y'all, to have high triglycerides compared to group B, which puts them at a greater risk for cardiometabolic disease. So basically, our words can cause mental and physical harm. Now, a more recent study published in Frontiers in Nutrition in November 2021 looked at the role social media can play in alleviating or intensifying fat phobia and weight bias. And this is an increasing concern with the younger population joining platforms, coupled with biased algorithms that tend to filter content from individuals in stigmatized groups while concentrating exposure on content that perpetuates widely held beliefs. So the researchers discuss how and why addressing these issues will take a wide variety of stakeholders like you and me. I mean, we gotta ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want for our youth? One where society reinforces the idea that they are automatically unhealthy, lazy, and unattractive until they find themselves in a smaller body? I mean, I hope not.
Such an interesting parallel when I think about things like religion and stuff like that too. It's like you think you're safe inside this set of rules that tells you how everything is and how the world works, and the minute you actually see the world for what it is,
that's kind of a swap. Where historically we've spent a lot of time with religion, and as people are moving away from religion, they need something to be their guiding compass, and so they've adopted the morality of wellness.
What does that mean when you don't have that? And I don't think that we've actually explored that enough. When all those things go away, it's almost like, well, who am I? Like, what am I?
What do I actually stand for? What are my actual values?
Yeah, like if we were to remove all those labels from food and from diets, where would we be?
I always ask my clients, like, we sort of come up with like, what are words that you want to use, like, what are values you want to use to describe your relationship with food? And so like mine, depending on where I'm at in life, is like adventure and comfort and sustainability. Like I'm really big on sustainability of like not just for myself, but for the earth. But I still love adventure. I like to try new things. I have a rule for myself when I travel. I can't get things I would normally get at home, because why would I travel if I could get that at home? And so it's like, okay, well, I want to eat like the locals. What do the locals eat? That requires me to have an adventurous spirit. And I really enjoy that about my relationship with food. But if I'm so fixated on I need to eat a specific way, I lose that adventure. And that's such an important part of who I am as a person, not just in my relationship with food. I like to travel the world. But if I'm so fixated on the food aspect and I believe, I need to look a certain way before I go travel to this place, I'm losing so much of the adventure that comes with going there.
I kind of want to move on to the next layer, which is maybe like geography and diet culture. We did a couple episodes on food access.
A food swamp is what we have more so. It kind of exists within the food desert space. So the food swamp is where there is access to food, but those foods are not the best for you. Like you said, there's plenty of access. Like there's chicken shacks and burger joints and whatever's on almost every corner in every portion of our local area here in Dallas, right? But are those foods, what are those foods, like what's the impact on your health and your family's health and the total wellness of the community? That is what a food swamp is, where there is access to food, but that is like, it's trash food.
If everything in someone's locale, in terms of, like food access, is all bad, then can they ever be good? Can they ever be healthy and well?
No, I think there's so much to that. I think the first part of that is like our understanding of the model of personal responsibility. And that's what's being implored here. It's like, you are personally responsible for your health and no one else is responsible for it. So if anything bad happens, it's your fault and I can blame you exclusively, as opposed to looking at your surroundings and looking at your environment. We're going to do away with the social determinants of health because that would imply that systems were responsible.
Can you define that term for everybody?
Social determinants of health? Yes, so that is looking at the different aspects in which systems of oppression play into someone's access to different things. So we're talking education, socioeconomic status, their region that they exist within, whether or not they have sidewalks, if there's a high rate of gun violence, all these different aspects that would play into someone's physical, emotional, and social safety, and how they can move through society. And so if you have that and we just move that to the side and we say, well, that doesn't exist, and we only look at the personal responsibility of health model, then you are going to get this. And I think the other aspect of this is that we are watching, in a sense, where we're having sort of backlash. I think, things move in cycles. And originally, convenience food was viewed as a luxury, right? That people could afford to get something pre-made.
Oh.
And then it became for the commoners, right? People who weren't white. And now it's not good. You notice on my platform, I never talk about a specific food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I don't think that that's helpful. Because we're looking too much at the minutia of things, and we're like, so I'm gonna break down this individual thing, as opposed to making sure that someone has enough of all the components. Are you getting enough carbs? How do you choose the carbs? Are you getting enough protein? Are you getting enough fat? How do you choose those things? Is it contextual to the recipe? Is it based on the time of day? Is it based on your locale? There's so many factors that go into that I'm like, I'd rather help teach you how to think about it than tell you what to eat. That's not my job. I didn't go to school for that.
What's the take then on processed foods? When I say processed, I'm thinking about, I want you to have less science in your diet and a lot more whole, like natural foods. And you can do that from a variety of things. I think even canned goods are good.
Cans
for
are
that.
wonderful.
Frozen foods. What would be your definition of something like processed that would be perhaps less healthful for someone?
I think we're looking at the definition of convenience at that point.
Okay.
So if that's the case, I'm like, okay, well, how convenient is this thing for you? And again, also contextual, because if I'm putting it back into, you live in a food apartheid, because a desert is a naturally occurring thing.
Yeah.
Apartheid, that's manufactured.
Yeah.
Food, first of all, poverty is manufactured. And food deserts or food apartheid is manufactured. That's created on purpose. You can look at the history of redlining to determine whether or not someone's going to have access to a grocery store. Right. That's the first thing we're going to look at. So if the only thing you have access to that, and I also know that you don't have a personal vehicle to get you 20 miles away to the next grocery store. So, and you have to hope that there's public transportation available. And we also know public transportation is still based on redlining. Then I'm going to say, okay, out of the convenient things, what is going to be the most helpful for you versus the least helpful for you and your goals towards things. But I'm not going to sit here and shame you because the only thing you have access to is super convenient things. And also, sometimes those things just taste really good. Look, that 15-cent pack of ramen got me through college. How dare I?
Get me through life right now. What are you
How
talking about?
dare I? Does that not mean that I can't dress it up? Absolutely. Maybe I can add my own egg, add some frozen veggies, go on with my day, have a great time.
So, to summarize, food is food. It's not inherently good or bad, and that's important to remember. People may just say good or bad to emphasize which food they may prioritize for their diet over another. So here's my advice. Fresh ingredients, widely defined, whenever possible, so you learn how different foods taste individually so you can mix and match to create your own culinary masterpiece. And also, do what works for you, your lifestyle, and your budget. I mentioned this to somebody about 2 weeks ago, and they're really into nutrition, and they had no idea what this term was. Orthorexia.
Mm-hmm. The reason that most people have not heard of it is because it's still not in the DSM, right? Which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Illnesses and Mental Disorders. And even though we've known about it, so if I remember correctly, orthorexia was coined in the 90s.
Oh,
so she's been here for a hot minute.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially the obsession with health, the obsession with eating healthy and working out a lot to the detriment of the person. So it's to their physical detriment, their social detriment, the mental, emotional detriment. Nothing is going well for that person. On the surface, it seems like everything's going well because they're eating so healthy. And I think the important thing to remember is that it's based on what they deem to be healthy. It's a focus on purity, cleanliness within their food practices, that on the outside to the person untrained would be like, well, they're just doing great in their life. They're just eating so healthy, living their best life, whatever. Me, I'm like, this person is struggling. They can't even they're so rigid in their food behaviors that they struggle to choose differently. It has to meet these criteria, and that the rules overlap to the point that they struggle to even choose within the rules. It depends on the day which rule is the one that gets to make the food decision, and they are no longer in control, right? Because it's an eating disorder. At the end of the day, it's an eating disorder, and that person is no longer in control. When you have an eating disorder, you are not in control anymore. The disorder is. And so it can look a number of different ways, but typically it is very, very rigid thoughts and beliefs about food, especially that relate to the purity and the cleanliness of the food, of I can't have these specific ingredients. It can't have over this many grams of whatever. It can't be past this portion size. It can't be this. It can't be that. It can't be this. It can't be that. And then there's this obsession with exercise, where I have to work out, And you'll notice that they're very rigid about their workouts. Their workouts are now starting to be at really interesting times of the day. They get agitated when they can't go to the gym or they can't work out. They make their schedule around their workouts. They will break commitments in order to go work out.
So it's like how OCD has a spectrum of things that a person can do to make them feel safe and in control, but it's food and fitness related.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what's wrong with having a routine and a strict routine to help someone stay on the right path to achieve their wellness goals? What's wrong with that?
We'll circle back to when we look back at the rest of our life and we're at the end and we're looking back, do I want people to say, oh yeah, Christyna was always in the gym?
Here's a nuance then. Like, is it the person is always there? Because what if they have balance in their life and they're like, hey, you know what? I work from 8 to 5 and from 6 to 7, I go to the gym. After that, I'm home like with my family. On the weekends, I still hang out with my friends.
Then that's not obsession.
Okay.
It is, I woke up at 3:00 in the morning and I was so anxious that I needed to work out. I worked a 12-hour shift and I still feel so anxious if I don't go to the gym, even though I'm exhausted.
Describing it, it's no different than having a drug addiction that you think you can't function without this.
Now, this is an important distinction. Enthusiasm for a more healthful diet is not automatically orthorexia, because I hear you in the back of the head right now. It's the compulsion or the excessive preoccupation with overvalued ideas about healthy eating. That's according to the National Institute of Health. Now, how this manifests in everyday life is varied, but here are some signs. A person becoming more rigid or agitated about eating, especially when it is not tied to a purpose like a fitness or bodybuilding contest. If a person is deriving an intense sense of self-worth and self-esteem from eating foods that are deemed healthy or clean, withdrawing socially because of the inability to maintain one's dietary standards, or even feeling guilty for breaking one's dietary standards. And I can say this because it takes one to know one. And I can admit, early in my journey, I battled orthorexia, and mine was rooted in fear that I would gain weight back if I ate anything other than foods that did not meet my caloric range. I was counting my macros all the time. But when I got with a trainer to help me to gain weight and to gain muscle, he encouraged me to eat more treat meals and eat off my plan. And I began to realize I was only starving myself, both nutritionally and socially. This is why I'm so passionate about the way that we share information within social media. I am not excluding myself from this conversation because I am an influencer and I know that I don't get it right all the time. I'm still learning as a person. I'm still evolving. I'm still learning about like my body and how it responds to stuff. So I'm just sharing that kind of stuff out. But I think the way that we talk about food is just as important, if not more important, than the food itself.
Oh, I agree. Because
you cast certain lights on what it means to be healthy. And you mentioned something at the very beginning talking about the cultural aspect of that and like which cultures are, are kind of healthy. And people have always asked me, oh, Kevin's not cooking soul food because it's not healthy. No, that's not it. Kevin doesn't cook soul food because he can't divorce the taste of soul food from the way that mama made it.
I think there's so much to that, right? Of like wanting to have respect and reverence for people's culture, right? Because the model in which I was trained to be a dietitian essentially did not pay honor or respect to anyone's culture other than like white American food. Everyone else was, poo-poo on you. How dare you eat that way? And we're going to do everything we can to divorce you from that. And I just don't believe in divorcing people from their culture. I think culture is beautiful. Yeah. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And the fact that you can explain culture through food, you can pass down tradition through food, and there's so much community around it. And there's so much, even like mentioning like how you love when your family makes it versus when you make it. I feel the same way. I love when my grandma makes things for me. Now, can I try my best to make them on my own? Yeah, but they don't taste quite the same. But the idea that we have to healthify these things that come from particular cultures in order to give them proximity to whiteness. Because that's what we're doing. We're giving them proximity of like, well, if I change these things about this, then it makes them more palatable to other people. It makes them, quote, better for us or healthier for us.
I'm going to challenge you just one thing. So we learn like all the time that, with different studies that, this certain ingredient in food has been causing XYZ issues in people over time and whatnot. And so there are a lot of people that are like, hey, you got to stay away from this and that. Aren't people doing a service by alerting people to certain things that could have the potential to hurt them?
You know, I saw someone that's like, oh, I still eat the same things I ate growing up. I just swapped out, instead of cooking with lard, I use a different cooking fat.
Yeah, I do that.
I'm totally fine with that.
Okay.
I'm not saying everything needs to be made with lard. What I'm saying is, why do we feel the need to change the
essence of the food?
essence of it?
Okay.
Why are we divorcing it from what it came from, as opposed to letting it be what it is? And I'm like, maybe you swap out your lard, but we're not actually changing the majority of the ingredients in there. We're letting that stay as it is. And then we're saying, okay, this other thing over here that doesn't have nearly as much cultural significance, I can work on changing those things, adding some more balance and variety to those things.
Okay.
You guys are giving guidelines, in a sense,
Yeah.
to foster creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
People need to understand that we are changing. You are aging. You evolve. Your body is not going to respond the same way. So
Yeah.
what do you do when you reach a certain age,
Right.
that thing, and your metabolism is a little bit slower?
Which is why I go back to, you will get whatever body I give you.
Okay.
Whatever you're going to get today is what you're going to get. And I don't know what to tell you. Like, so that I can go through each of these stages of my life and not feel like I need to keep looking like the 18-year-old version of myself, the 25-year-old version of myself. Like, I deeply appreciate that. Like, yeah, people tell me I look young, and I like to believe that I look young, but that's because I drink my water and I mind my business.
I just said it to somebody.
I drink
Didn't
my
just
water
say
and I
that to
mind
somebody?
my
Like 2 days
business.
ago. Yeah.
I just said
If it's not my business, it's not my business. I mind the business that pays me. But like, I also think it's so cool that I can still look back at younger pictures of myself and be like, oh, I can see where I aged. And like, I don't find anything inherently wrong with that. I think it's an honor to be able to continue to keep getting older, because I can look at people who I'm the same age as them and they are not here anymore. So I find it an honor to be able to get older and to have my body change as it gets older. Like, thank goodness.
Yeah.
I think that's always my goal, is to use whatever platform I have responsibly, of like making sure that people understand that no matter how you spend this, I always operated from my ethics. And so you can never challenge that I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we need people like you guys to stay on the platform, not to get off. Because
Ooh, Jesse, it's a hard sell, bro.
Look,
It's
getting
a
off
hard
is
sell.
it's looking real sexy.
I'm about to-
It's looking real sexy.
Can we get a fist bump on that?
Looking real sexy.
you're just gonna leave all the terrible people on there then.
It's looking real good. But one thing that I will say, when you come over, we're gonna have that
That cauliflower pizza?
from Greenville.
Just for
Pizza.
you.
Yes.
Just for you.
And sweet potato brownie.
Yes.
Just the troller. That is it for today's episode. I hope that y'all enjoyed it. I know there was a lot packed in here. I want to first off thank Christyna for spending time with us. We had so much rich content that we didn't get to share. So next week, we're going to be showing y'all some snippets of that. Even us going head to head, our own passionate debate about sweet potato brownies and cauliflower pizza crust. For some, this episode got you thinking a whole lot. For others, it may have made you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm gonna tell you this, ask yourself why. Just with anything in life, it's okay to question things and to unpack why we feel the way that we do. I definitely encourage you to have a lively and passionate discussion, but always remember, what do you want the intended outcome of those discussions to be? Thank y'all for watching. Catch up on earlier episodes of AtTheTableTalks.com. And if you want some daily inspiration and to see this smiling face, ding, catch me on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at FitMenCook. And you'll get all the daily inspo that you need. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for watching and listening like you do. Until next time, keep it healthful, but of course, never, ever boring. Boom! Bye, peeps.